This is Brother Brian's fourth study, Abigail, being a woman of good understanding. And our reading is 1 Samuel chapter 25 from verses 14 to 42. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them. But the men were very good unto us, and we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields. They were a wall unto us, both by night and day, all the while we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master, and against all his household, for he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. Then Abigail made haste, and took 200 loaves, and 2 bottles of wine, and 5 sheep ready dressed, and 5 measures of parched corn, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on asses. And she said unto her servants, Go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband Nabal. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the covert of the hill, and behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. Now David had said, Surely in vain have I kept all that this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that pertained unto him, and he hath requited me evil for good. So and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave all that pertain to him by the morning light, any male. And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass, and fell before David on her face, and bowed herself to the ground, and fell at his feet, and said, Upon me, my lord, upon me let this iniquity be, and let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience, and hear the words of thine handmaid. Let not my lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, thine handmaid, saw not the young men of my lord, whom thou didst send. Now therefore, my lord, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand, now let thine enemies, and they that seek evil to my lord, be as Nabal. And now this blessing which thine handmaid hath brought unto my lord, let it even be given unto the young men that follow my lord. I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid, for the Lord will certainly make my lord a sure house, because my lord fighteth the battles of the Lord, and evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee, and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord thy God, and the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling. And it shall come to pass, when the Lord have done to my lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel, that this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offence of heart unto my lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my lord hath avenged himself. But when the Lord shall have dealt well with my lord, then remember thine handmaid. And David said to Abigail, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, which sent thee this day to meet me. And blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou, which hast kept me this day from coming to shed blood, and from avenging myself with mine own hand. For in very deed, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, which hath kept me back from hurting thee, except thou hadst come to meet me, surely there had not been left unto Nabal by the morning light any male. So David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and said unto her, Go up in peace to thine house. See, I have hearkened to thy voice, and have accepted thy person. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. Wherefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning light. But it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. And it came to pass about 10 days after, that the Lord smote Nabal, and he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord, that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil. For the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And Nabal sent and communed with Abigail, to take her to him to wife. And when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake to her, saying, David sent us unto thee, to take thee to him to wife. And she arose and bowed herself on her face to the earth, and said, Behold, let thine handmaid be a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my lord. And Abigail hasted and arose, and rode upon an ass with 5 damsels of hers that went after her. And she went after the messengers of David, and became his wife.
Hello, my dear brothers and sisters. This series is related to Israel. That was the idea of it, and we thought it was good to have one of them, at least as a woman, who was able, of course, to share the hope of Israel, as were the male members of Israel. And Abigail's always been a very favourite figure, female figure, in the lives and thoughts of so many. So we have chosen her illustration of an Israelite indeed, like we did with Joseph. Joseph's one of these sort of ultimate Israelites, isn't he? That's how it fits in this series. And Abraham, of course, need anything be said. But Abigail, of course, is in the Bible, and is in a very interesting place in the Bible. And she certainly was a loyalist of the hope of Israel in a very interesting way. The record of her life's work really is found in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And it follows the sad death of Samuel, verse 1 of chapter 25. And then it introduces us to a man called Nabal. I can find his name. His first time his name is given is in verse 3 of 1 Samuel chapter 25. It says there in verse 2, there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now, Carmel is more on the eastern side of the nation, and that's a very large number of sheep and goats that he has, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, which means, according to the concordance, it means cause of delight. And that's always given to a little child, but she was a delight. And this story, which is the only chapter that's devoted to her, is a very beautiful story indeed. She was really a pretty good stock, beautiful countenance and good understanding. The good understanding is put before the beautiful countenance. But the two always go nicely together, really, don't they? But the man was churlish, that's her husband, and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. That's how the family was put together. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep, and David sent out 10 young men. And David said unto the young men, Get you up to Carmel, and go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. Now David had 400 men that were with him. There was quite a group of them out there in the bush. And so he was really desperate to have occupation and to obtain some wages from that, and thus food and ability to keep his considerable body of people together. So what could you do? Well, one thing you could do is you could be a steward by night, because many of the farms, of course, in those days would have been very primitive concerns, and therefore animals, wild animals, lion, bear and so forth, that type of thing was not unknown in the countryside of Judea. So if you acted as a guardsman for the flocks and herds of other people, then there could be quite a worthy income gathered from that. So verse 4, David heard in the wilderness that Nabal did shear his sheep. It was always a time of celebrity, because the clip was coming off, and there was good evidence of good season, and it's going to be a good clip. So it's a time to enjoy the merriment of the farming community, if they would. David sent out 10 young men. David said unto the young men, Get you up to Carmel, and go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. David felt that he had a good relationship with Nabal, and it would be respected, even if it was his workmen that went to Nabal to talk to him about that. And thus shall he say to him, Peace be both to thee, and peace be to thine house, and peace be unto all that thou hast. It's a very nice open way to greet his neighbour. Probably quite a bit of distance in it. They would have had quite a bit of land, obviously. And he gives a very positive manner to his employee who's going to go and meet Nabal on his behalf. And says, David, it's time for shearing. And I think that it might be a very happy and financial circumstance for us to visit. And David had done a lot of this caring of his flocks and so on. It says that in verse 7, and that it was very successful. So in going to Nabal, David felt that there was a reasonable cause. Even a fellow a bit grudgy like Nabal might still recognise the fact that he had some pretty good solid people out there in the dark, night after night, looking after his animals while he slept comfortably in bed. And they might just think it was a reasonable thing if they provided some gift to David. Now I've heard that thou hast shearers. Now thy shepherds which were with us, we hurt them not, verse 7. Neither was there aught missing unto them, all the while that they were in Carmel. It was a brilliant discipline upon his, well, he had 600 Israelites out in his group, and to keep that group disciplined and doing something useful wouldn't be easy, would it? Well, David had it under good control, and he felt that Nabal would know that that was a true fact. And if you don't know much about it, Nabal, verse 8, you ask the men who were out there, Give, I pray thee, whatsoever cometh to thine hand unto thy servants and to thy son David. David puts himself in a junior sort of situation to Nabal. No doubt in terms of years that would have been true. But Nabal was a scruffy old grumbling person. And it says in verse 10, Nabal answered David's servants and said, "Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse?" Who's Jesse? There be many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. So in one nasty sentence, he's cut down the status of David as though, who cares about him? Who cares about him? He's actually already crowned. The king is still there. Saul is still king. But David has been anointed, hasn't he, by the prophet in his own place of Bethlehem. So people knew that. A lot of people would know that. And then there have been the battles, of course, when Saul went out with David as the leader of his army. It was David always that came home with the great results. The nation loved that. Who is the son of Jesse? Well, a lot of people said, we know darn well who he is. Even if we can't spell your name of Nabal, we know who David, the son of Jesse of Judah, is. But he scorns it. So verse 11, "Shall I then take my bread and my water and my flesh that God gave him, that I have killed before my shearers, and give it unto men whom I know not whence they be?" They've got no permanent occupation. They're wanderers. So David's young men, verse 12, turned their way and went again and came and told David the reception that they received from this grumbling old Nabal that was so well off that he didn't know how to be nice. But David actually was furious. He took it as a real hard hit. He's out there with all these men. A lot of them are strange people with problems in life. And sometimes there were children there that had managed as well. David didn't know a lot about all those things, did he? And apart from keeping them all alive, he was out there with security matters that he had to look after and look after for other people. That's where they got their income. He really felt it. Now, that's not like David normally, is it? But this time, it really caught him. He was very, very irritated by this attitude that Nabal evidenced to his workmen. David said unto his men, "Gird ye on every man his sword." When David says that, trouble was ahead. If any man knew how to use a sword, it was David and his men. Whatever battle they went to in Saul's army, it was successful because of David. And they girded on every man his sword. And then it pauses and says, and David also girded on his sword. He's jumped the line. He's going to get involved as well. That's real business. Nobody ever beat David on the field of battle. Didn't come near it. David's going to go as well. And they girded on every man his sword, and David also girded on his sword, and there went up after David about 400 men. That's a lot of people. A lot of people to look after. And do you think that they all wanted to run off and run for probably a number of miles? And 200 alone were left by the stuff. But one of Abigail's servants, who had a good pair of ears, had overheard what the circumstances were. And she thought, I don't think that Abigail really knows what's going on. So she slips around the corner of the house, verse 14. One of the young men she was of the property, and told Abigail. And Abigail didn't have any idea that was the case. She says that later, that I did not know. I was not informed, but this is when she did know, but things had developed already. She was not there. He was not there, able to reverse the circumstances. Neither was she. But this is Abigail, verse 14. One of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, "Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them." See, they all knew it, didn't they? They knew what sort of man their boss was. And this man, this is a good man. I mean, he's telling some story behind his boss's back. That's true. But you know, he's no idiot, is he? Because he knows darn well that the quality of David and the quality of David's men was outstanding. And if they were really railed about being so impugned as David was, then he thought there'll be big trouble, more than what we could perhaps imagine. So he sneaks into the kitchen where Abigail's busy, and he tells her, "Have you heard the news? Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed on them." The man is employed. He speaks about his boss there as a master, but he knows there's trouble if nothing's done. But the men, he says, and this is now an independent opinion, isn't it? It's not Nabal, it's not David. But the men were very good unto us, that is, to the employment and all the people that are in the farm of Nabal. They were wonderful to us in protecting us. And we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant with them when we were in the fields. They never pinched some of the equipment and nicked off with this or that. We had no complaints with them at all. But the men were very, very good unto us. We were not hurt, neither missed we anything when we were in the fields. They were a wall unto us both by night and day. Isn't it a lovely way they expressed it? This young man that popped his head around the corner. All the while that they were with them keeping the sheep, they were just exemplary. We had good mates out there from David's troops. Now therefore, know and consider, Abigail, know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his household, for he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him. That's what an independent member of Nabal's employment group thought about Nabal when he wasn't being polite. The fact was, he was a surly man. Now what do you do with a circumstance like that? Abigail's a woman. She's got nothing to do with swords and battle and so on, has she? What's she going to do? She's got a grisly old husband who doesn't like to be outshone by anybody and has a shot at someone that is obviously above him. And to have David on his property, yes, okay. He keeps the lions away and so on. But, you know, he's a bit of a vagabond, you know. He's not really our cut. So I don't really have to respect him. But his wife does. She knows all about David, as the whole nation did. And she was prepared to do what she could. And this is why she's in the Bible. This is the part of the story that makes up the worth, the great worth, the example of Abigail. Do you know what she did? She acted. She did something. There's so many times that you have a crisis and nobody does anything. You talk about it, but quite often there's not too many at all put their hand up to do something about it. Abigail was an active person, conscientious to the circumstances she saw before her. She just look at verse 18. What sort of a kitchen has she got? She made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine. It's not in glass bottles, of course. And 5 sheep ready dressed. How come? And 5 measures of parched corn. How come that's ready? And 100 clusters of raisins. And 200 cakes of figs. And laid them on asses. And she said unto her servants, Go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband, Nabal. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the covert of the hill, and behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. There was a bit of time for them to travel to the homestead, and I would say to put that amount of food together in verses 18 to 20 must have taken some time, wasn't it? This was no 5-minute job. But isn't she wonderful? She's a mother, she's a lady. She's in quite good circumstances financially. She doesn't want to get involved in this sort of rough stuff. But she did what she could. And it was wonderful in the end. Now, David was really, really mad. He was really crazy. And this is what he had actually said. Very unlike David. That's why it's written here. David had said, Surely in vain have I kept all that this fellow hath in the wilderness. I helped him out night after night, week after week, month after month. All my men out there in the cold, and their families back behind the bushes somewhere else, a few miles away. And this is what I get for it. And he expresses his thoughts in very strong words. So and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave of all that pertain to him just so much as one man. And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass, and fell before David on her face, and bowed herself to the ground. Obviously, she went at top speed. David was going at top speed wherever he was camped, and he was coming towards the house, and they met. Where there was a tip from this side and a drop from the other, and so they met sort of in the valley in between. And Abigail saw David, hasted and lighted off the ass, and fell before David on her face, and bowed herself to the ground. She's a remarkable woman, isn't she? She's been working in the kitchen there, getting all that stuff ready. Flat out, like you couldn't imagine. But when she gets close to David, she shows tremendous respect. Now, what's in her mind, my dear brothers and sisters? She fell at his feet. Upon me, my Lord, upon me, let this iniquity be. It was her husband, she says. Well, let that fault be on me. I'll bear that. She doesn't have to bear it. She said nothing that was against David at all. But there's the quality of her mind. It's a beautiful mind, isn't it? To avoid difficulty for others, danger, loss, death, she took the blame. She accepted the blame for herself, even when she'd done nothing whatsoever against David. I pray thee, speak in thine audience, and hear the words of thine handmaid. What a beautiful woman she is. She could find beautiful words at any time. Out of breath, jumping off the horse, or whatever it was that they had. And yet she could put it all together. She'd be thinking of the words that would help him. And he's full of vengeance. But if she takes that away and accepts that for herself, then it might be that David thinks, well, the point's been made. And the blood shed will not occur. So she fell at his feet. Upon me, my Lord. Let not my Lord, verse 25, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal. She has to put some pretty strong words into so that David gets the idea that she's not fooled by her husband. It was a time for such words. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of people dead. So she's accepting the guilt of all, and she's taking the danger of all. What an amazing girl she is. Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal means a fool. And that's the meaning of the word. Verse 25. I, thine handmaid, saw not the young men of my Lord. When they came, I didn't see them, or I would have done something then. And so she's saying that's why there's been some delay in bringing some understanding of your concerns. I just didn't see them. Now that's an important phrase, because once she does know, she does everything she possibly can. That's why that's put in verse 25, because she wasn't that woman that was faced up to her responsibilities. If there was ecclesial work to be done, she was there. If it was rain or shine, didn't make any difference. She was a woman who was given to all the interests of Israel and her family in particular, and to David. Not because he was good looking, or because he was athletic, or because he had a big sword and he'd done great things on the field of battle. But she knew that what he did for Israel, the people. And the whole nation knew about him. And she used to keep her eyes open to the news of the day to see what the latest battle was that Saul had become victor of. Because the person in the middle of it all was David, this one that's in our property here. And she wanted to do whatever she could to keep the peace of the place and to keep people alive. Put the fault on me. I didn't act early enough, but I didn't actually know. So she says in verse 26, thy soul liveth, seeing Yahweh hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood. Now I just love the way she says that. It's not over, is it? She's only opened up with a few words. But she's skillful, and she's willing. She'll lose her own pride if she can save the lives of others. It's a beautiful person. Now therefore, my Lord, as Yahweh liveth, and she's calling David her Lord. Do you notice that? She did that in verse 25, and she's done it again in verse 26, because he is in an indirect way. He's an anointed man preparing for the throne, isn't he? He left Saul's whereabouts in the kingdom that he was administering. He left and went into the wilderness. He could no longer stay in the city where the king was. So now therefore, my Lord, as Yahweh liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing Yahweh hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and she hopes that's true, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand. That's her phrase. Underline that. That's her phrase. It occurs 4 times in this chapter. Now let thine enemies and they that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal. She shows that she's maybe the wife of Nabal, but her affections, her admiration is entirely on David's side. Now David is a wanderer in the wilderness. He hasn't got any trappings of royalty whatsoever. That's what she says, and she's quite a woman, in quite some circumstances. But all that didn't mean a peanut to her. All the best clothes, all the whatever you might have, That wasn't what she was interested in. What she was interested in was the lives of good Israelites that were being harmed by the folly of her husband Nabal. And now she says in verse 27, this blessing which thine handmaid hath brought unto my Lord, she's still calling him my Lord, let it even be given unto the young men that follow my Lord, those that missed out. I brought some food, just look at it, verse 18 to 20. I pray thee forgive the trespass of thine handmaid. She's still on it, as though she's the one that's responsible. And she says in verse 28, I pray thee forgive the trespass of thine handmaid, for Yahweh will certainly make my Lord a sure house. It's almost the language, isn't it? Of a house of a kingdom. Because my Lord fighteth the battles of Yahweh, and evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. You see what the husband was saying about David? In that home there was two completely different assessments of David. That's her assessment. Yahweh is with him, and he fighteth the battles of Yahweh. The things he did in the army, they weren't what a normal man could do. No way. He was out in front of all the others. And she says that can only be because Yahweh is with him. If he's with him, I'm with him. That's her position. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my Lord, he shall be bound in the bundle of life with Yahweh thy God. Now that's just beautiful language, isn't it? She's a godly woman. She's not out there just playing around out in a few bundles of hay or something in the yard. Her mind is right on the central interests of Israel. Absolutely, right on them. Why did she take such a dangerous trip? Because she wanted to assuage the anger of David. Because she wants him to be king. And she knows what God has done. And she wants him to be king because if he's king, Israel will be much more secure. The vantage point over the nations around them will be greatly increased if this man were king. That's why she's done it. But if David spoils his copybook and takes his sword against men that were not dressed for war, and that's noise all around the country, then Israel would have lost a terribly wonderful asset that has so far in Saul's army been so valuable to Israel. But do you notice what she said in verse 29? She's pretty sharp. And the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling. And I don't think that's accident. The story of David with the sling, of course, would have gone all through Israel, just like it goes through Christadelphi in Sunday school. Sunday school students, doesn't it? Everybody can see David with the sling. And so they could have, of course, in Israel. And so she just gives the story a bit of a niggle. And she says, much as to say, as you did in the valley of Elah against much greater people than Nabal. Isn't that beautiful? That shows you she's a person who loves her Bible. She loves the expressions of her Bible. It shall come to pass, verse 30, when Yahweh shall have done to my Lord, he's still calling him Lord, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel. There's the picture. That's what God's promised. She knows all about the promises made to David. She learnt them as a little girl in Sunday school, like our children do. Because there's only one hope, you know. There's not two hopes in the Bible. There's only one hope. There were promises made to Abraham and David. And she knows that. Even though one of them's not yet got to the throne, she knows where he's destined to go. She's a wonderful girl. You know, we have sisters in our meetings that are like this. They love their Bibles. They love their tuition that they give to their children and their grandchildren. And they use every opportunity to urge that in the collegial life. Keep it up. Keep it up. This sister is an inspiration. Not just in energy and activity, but her mind is an inspiration. Look at the detail involved in 30. I mean, David hasn't become king yet. But she knows that God has said these things about him. It's current knowledge. Must have come, I suppose, from Samuel in some way. Well, Samuel, of course, was the one that anointed him. Chapter 16, verse 7. But she knows about it. She's just a farmer's wife out there in the property. But her mind is as sharp as it could be. And it shall come to pass, verse 30, that when Yahweh shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken. Look at that. Concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel. It's as though it's happened, but it hasn't. He's not king yet. Far from it. But she knows it's going to happen, doesn't she? She believes the promises. That there shall be no grief unto thee, nor offence of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causelessly, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. But when Yahweh shall have dealt well with my Lord, then please remember me. She is a wonderful woman, isn't she? She's got a whole picture there. She was in there getting all the things ready on the kitchen table and pushing out the whatever you have on the kitchen table in cooking. She's got it all there, it's on her hands, but she's quickly got her things together and away she's gone. And in her heart, in her mind, this is what's flowing all the time. And she's waiting for that. And she doesn't want David to upset his reputation. He has already been anointed by Samuel, even though Saul has forced him to go into privacy. But David is very, very impressed with this woman. See 33. And blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou, which hast kept me this day from coming to shed blood, and from avenging myself with mine own hands. See that phrase? We said that's her phrase. It's there again in verse 26, isn't it? And here it is again in verse 33. And it's up there also in verse 31. Lord hath avenged himself. And it's the chapter of Moses in which he decries the attitude of avenging oneself. Somebody's not nice to use, so you take it out on them. Instead of going to God in prayer and faith and overcoming the matter, you seek the first opportunity to bring harm or ill report upon the person that is so acting towards you. She doesn't want David to do that. And so she's going to block him off with her conveyance, and he's going to be given time to cool down. Let's have a look at the passage which is behind all of this. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 32. It's Moses' words. It's almost the last thing that he said after the Song of Moses. Now, in this 32nd chapter of Deuteronomy, you've got a whole lot of expressions similarly worded. Verse 35, to me belongeth the vengeance and recompense. Leave it to God. That's her recommendation. Verse 36, for Yahweh shall judge his people and repent himself for his servants when he seeth that their power is gone and there is none shut up. He will come in and help. That's what the passage is saying. Verse 41, I will render vengeance to mine enemies and will reward them that hate me. 43, rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and will render vengeance to his adversaries and will be merciful unto his land. She's trying to settle him down, to call him down, that he might remember that God is out there and he can see everything that's happening. He knows about Nabal, he knows about David, knows the whole score. And she's saying, David, it will happen as God has intended it to be. Don't upset that which God is working toward. And he says, verse 33, blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou which hast kept me this day from avenging myself and mine own hand. He knows the passage. He knows it very well. So, as you know, with the story, it came to pass, verse 38, it came to pass after 10 days that Yahweh smote Nabal that he died. Just like you might have thought would happen. It happened perhaps quicker, more immediately than what even Abigail thought. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, blessed be Yahweh. He could see God in it. He knew that was true, but he was very, very upset. And sometimes we do get like that. It's a time when a good friend might take hold of us and say, hey, just let's step out here and have a chat about this. Or give him a ring. Or send a little note and say, look, I know you already heard about this. And I understand some of the things that you're saying, but don't upset the ecclesia because of it. Bear it if you can. God knows. He will avenge, and he's promised that he will. That's the sort of woman she was. What an asset to ecclesial life. Blessed be Yahweh that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, said David, and hath kept his servant. He's got the whole point of that, hasn't he? Hath kept his servant, Yahweh has kept his servant from evil. For Yahweh hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. And when the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, David sent us unto thee to take thee to him to wife. That's rather cute, isn't it? Send a few servants out to pick up your wife. Things were different in those days. David never had a wife at this stage. Do you remember that? He lost his wife because she was the daughter of Saul. And Saul had given Michal, his daughter, to someone else. It says that in verse 44, see? Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Phalti, the son of Laish, which was of Galim. Saul thought, I can hurt him in that way. So he got hold of his daughter and pulled her away from the connections with David and arranged that he would marry his daughter. So David had no wife. Now he's got Abigail. She's coming up. And it does say, too, in verse 43, David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were also both of them his wives. That is, Abigail and Michal were both his wives. He had 2 wives before this event. He didn't have any for a period of time after the king Saul moved in on him. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, I would think if you want a lovely lesson with your growing daughter and her teenagers, this is a very beautiful story. But the fundamental behind it all is an awareness of what the scriptures say about our responsibility in those circumstances. Not to get wildly mad, do something that's violent and offensive to your enemy, but to seek to do good to your enemy, to bless the situation with good conduct, strong principles, yes, but things that bring for peace and building up our ecclesia. Not for running away from the issue. She didn't do that. She didn't run off next door and say, oh, there's some soldiers down the street, did she? She met the circumstances, and the ecclesia was blessed because of her forward nature. She was truly a daughter in Israel, wasn't she? And so she rightly is part of our evening tonight. Thank you.